Welcome delegates to Track 5, practice, and reflection. Let us welcome the first presenter, Chong Ziyun, with her final year project titled The Use of First Language L1 in ESL Classroom.
Hi everyone, my name is Chong Ziyun. Today I will be presenting on my final year project, The Use of First Language L1 in ESL Classrooms. The reason behind this title is, during my first teaching practicum, I was in a dilemma and I struggled to make a decision on whether or not to use students' first language in my classrooms and when should I use it. The first research objective is to find out the use of L1 in ESL classrooms, and the second research objective is to identify if pre-service teachers use L1 in the same way for different functionalities. The research questions are: do pre-service teachers use students L1 in their ESL classrooms? And what functions do these pre-service teachers use students L1 for? Alright, a decision on whether or not to use students' first language in ESL classrooms has been a controversial issue because there are theories or beliefs regarding the most effective way to master a language. Researchers such as Krashen believes that the use of L1 stops the learners from getting the right amount of input. However, for Gabler, he supports the use of L1. In his study, he claimed that teachers can use translanguaging to keep up with the flow of interaction and to allow learners to understand the message given. The research was carried out using quantitative research approach. The instrument used was a questionnaire. The study was conducted in Sultan Idris Education University. The data was collected from a total of 50 English pre-service teachers who had previously undergone their first teaching practicum. Alright. As for the findings, only 12% of the pre-service teachers answered never when asked if they use students L1 in their classrooms. Therefore, the data of these 12% pre-service teachers were not included in the next research objective. Based on the data collected, the pre-service teacher participants have stronger agreement with each other regarding the 15 statements. The range of standard deviations of 0.88 to 1.29 indicates the mutual thoughts towards one domain. Based on the table, L1 is used mostly for managerial functionality, and social use functionality comes second, then followed by language functional use. To conclude, whether one supports it or not, L1 is used in most of the ESL classrooms. The study shows that the pre-service teachers participants were keen to use L1 in their ESL classrooms. In terms of functions, the study shows that the pre-service teachers of Sultan Idris Education Universities use L1 for different functional purposes. Well, that's all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Nur Shahira Binti Labina, with her final year project titled Investigating the Factors That Hinder ESL Students' Participation in an Online ESL Classroom.
Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Nur Shahira Binti Labina and the title of my final year project is Investigating the Factors That Hinder ESL Students' Participation in an Online ESL Classroom. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the Ministry of Education has directed all teaching and learning sessions to be conducted online. However, the implementation of online learning makes teachers always face the lack of participation from the ESL students in an online ESL classroom. So, the purpose of this research is to investigate the factors that hinder ESL students' participation, to identify the cause of ESL students' lack of participation, and to find the possible way to enhance ESL students' active participation in an online ESL classroom. The research questions are: what are the possible reasons for ESL students to not participate in an online ESL classroom? And what are the possible solutions to increase ESL students' participation in an online ESL classroom? From the literary review, I can conclude that e-learning was considered less effective than face-to-face learning in terms of increasing skills and social competencies. Researchers acknowledge that e-learning was less active compared with traditional classes. The research design for this study is mixed method research, which the researcher used both qualitative and quantitative. The participants are Form 1 students, which consisted of 37 students. There are 3 instruments that the researcher had used, including survey, classroom observation checklist, and teacher reflective entry. So, the finding of this research showed that the research question had been answered successfully. Based on the results of this study, a total of 24 students stated that they need to help their parents at home, and 17 students agree that they did not feel comfortable studying at home. However, for the statement that they have an unsuitable space to attend classes online, only 8 students agreed, and this number is small. If we relate this data, students have a suitable space to study at home, but they do not engage in online classes more because they are not comfortable to study at home. We can see that students' environment at home plays a greater role in decreasing student involvement in online classes. This suggests that, compared to the role of teachers, parents have a greater responsibility in ensuring that children have free time and comfortable space for them to participate in online classes. So, to conclude this study, regular discussion should also be held between teachers and parents. Cooperation between teachers and parents of students is very important in curbing this problem. This due to the results of the study, which show that students tend not to participate in online classes due to their personal problems. Therefore, communication between parents and teachers will definitely be able to alleviate this problem. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Muhammad Fadli Zil Ikram bin Jasri, with his final year project titled Understanding Students' Opinion on the Use of Effective Instruction Strategy in a Classroom.
Good to you. My name is Muhammad Fadli Zil Ikram bin Jasri, and this is my final report presentation. So for this final report, my title is Understanding Students' Opinion on the Use of Effective Instruction Strategies in a Classroom. So the reasoning behind why I had chosen to do this topic is because during my LM1, I encountered an issue with my students in which they contacted me and asked me to explain to them on my instruction of a task. So basically, they do not understand the task that I've given them instruction. So I felt it is necessary for me to do a research to understand the overall students' opinion on the use of effective instruction strategies in a classroom. Do they even understand it? Do they feel that instruction is necessary? That leads to my research objective, my first one, which was to investigate students' overall opinion on the effective instruction strategy in the classroom. And then the second objective was to determine the effective instruction strategy used by the teacher in a classroom. For my literature review, I divided into 2: effective instruction in a classroom and then effective instructional strategies, in which I have used overall 10 past research to determine my research. So for my methodology, I have used questionnaire in which I have formed it using Google Form and then shared it with my students using WhatsApp. And then I also done self-reflection entry in which I had reviewed my previous teaching recording and then conclude and completed a self-reflection entry. And then based on the methodology, it is the finding and discussions in which from my self-reflection entry, I had watched my previous lesson, pre-recorded lesson on the 21st of September. That is the date of the video. And after watching the video, I completed my self-reflection entry and conclude that during my teaching, I have used direct instruction more often than any other instruction strategy. So yeah, that's it. That is where the issue comes from, which is I have used direct instruction in which the students do not really uh, could not really understand or could not really care about it. So and then from my other finding and discussion, which was my questionnaire, as you can see here, figure 1 is the result of the questionnaire, and then there's question 2 to 6, which I combine all of my questions into one figure because all of them have the same answers, so I feel it's necessary to put them in the same questions. And then figure 3, also figure 4, 5 and 6 are all the questionnaires result. Okay, there are a total of 10 questions that I have prepared in the questionnaire, and these are all the findings and the questions that I have found. In summary, I believe that in overall, the students' opinion on the effective instruction strategies are necessary. They feel that it is necessary to use those strategies in a classroom so that they can understand the lesson. And then from my self-reflection entry, I can also conclude that I have um, used direct instruction more often than any other effective instruction strategies, in which that lead to the issues of this research. So in conclusion, I feel like I need to use more different type of educational strategies so that my students are more included in the lessons. And that is all from my presentation. Thank you.
Next presenter, Zoe, with her final year project titled Improve Students' Oral Communication and Interaction Abilities Through the Effective Classroom Questioning.
Hello and good day everyone. I appreciate opportunity to be with you here today. I'm here to talk about my final year project, which titled Improve Students' Oral Communication and Interaction Abilities Through the Effective Classroom Questioning. Okay, first of all, I would like to introduce the background of the study. Nowadays, classroom questioning is an important part of today's English classroom teaching, and it is a necessary link of efficient English classroom teaching. The quality of teachers' questioning and interaction in English classroom teaching reflects to a certain extent of teachers' ability to conduct the lesson. Also, the classroom questioning is the teacher's teaching method to check the knowledge of the students, and it is kind of a communication and interaction between the teachers and students in the teaching and learning process. To a certain extent, the classroom teaching process is one of the most effective and appreciated method that the modern teachers and students should be followed. Okay, so for the problem statement is that the teachers have frequency of ineffective classroom questioning during the teaching process. For example, the questions like, is it right? Isn't it? Do you understand? And this series of invalid classroom questions. Other than that, in order to complete the teaching goals, sometimes the teacher will reduce the time of classroom questioning, which makes preserved teacher difficult to find a balance between the difficulty of teaching and the level of the students. So therefore, in setting up questions in the classroom, there will exist the situations like questions are too difficult or too simple for students to answer. Moving on to the research objectives, there are two objectives, which are to examine the effects of classroom questioning on students' oral communication and interaction abilities. Also, to investigate the types of effective online English classroom questioning. For research questions, I came up two questions. First, what's the effects of the classroom questioning on students' communication and interaction abilities? And what types of questions have a greater effect on promoting students' classroom interaction and improve their communication skills? For the literature review, based on the articles, I can conclude the three significant aspects. As per the present phase of academic system, the process of teachers' classroom questioning is carrying a great value towards the study life of the students by helping out the types of questions created by the teacher. The students may able to declare their problems related to their study and also can practice their interaction and also the communication abilities. And during the classroom teaching and learning, the process of communication is quite important to be comfortable for students. According to the Mazadonost, he stated that in the modern system of learning procedure, the questioning method can be easy to get an idea related to the interacting process of the students. Moving on to the research method, the qualitative and the quantitative research were used in this study, and the video recording, also the self-observation checklist are the research instruments. Finally, I would like to talk about the findings of this study. For the purpose of applying the research questions, I did a self-observation checklist from two classes, which are from Form 1 and Form 2. I surveyed the types of questions asked by me during the teaching process, and also the motivation and the length of students' respond to the teacher's questions. According to the article that I reviewed, the teacher's questioning and classified the questions into four types, which are content questions concerning factual matters. That is the question beginning with what. The second type includes questions of inference beginning with why and what. The third type includes open questions which do not require any inference. And the last type are questions for communication, which could control the behavior of the students during the class. So for four types of questions, they can generally categorize into two types, which are display questions and also the referential questions. As you can see from following diagram, the findings in this study pointed out that the total number of the questions asked by the teacher during the teaching process was 51. It is noted that the WTH question occupied 67% and the yes or no questions was 24% and other questions were 11%. It's not hard to find that referential questions were asked more than can get students' opinion and interpretation about discussed topics, and the length of their response of this type questions also more than the display questions. As a result, the teacher's classroom questioning has become one of the most important means to inspire students' thinking and improve their communication and interaction abilities. In conclusion, increasing the amount of classroom questioning is of great significance for ESL classroom students. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Nur Sabrina Najat binti Khairul Anwar, with her final year project titled Teachers Questioning Techniques in Encouraging Learners' Participation in an Online ESL Class.
Greetings. My name is Nur Sabrina Najat binti Khairul Anwar. I'm a final year student in the Department of English and Literature at the Sultan Idris Education University. My supervisor is Dr. Nuraini binti Zulkifli, and the title of my action research manuscript is Teachers Questioning Techniques in Encouraging Learners' Participation in an Online ESL Class. So based on my experience teaching Form 2 students via Telegram and Google Meet for 8 weeks, one of the major problems that I faced was the students' lack of participation. The students were reluctant to participate and engage themselves with classroom discussions. For the most part, I had to repeat myself and ask additional questions in order to give them an idea of how and what to respond. There were also instances where I responded to my own question due to the prolonged silence by the students, which mirrored their lack of participation or even interest towards the classroom discussion. Therefore, the aim of this action research is to identify the types of questioning techniques used by the teacher during online lessons. In addition, it aims to investigate the type of question and questioning technique that best promotes students' participation during online learning. The participants involved in this research consist of 67 Form 2 students from a secondary school located in Serkam Darat, Malacca. In terms of proficiency, most of the students were of lower intermediate. For this action research, a qualitative approach was employed, and the data were gathered by using video recording transcripts, teachers' reflective entries, and classroom observation checklists. The observation checklist was developed by referring to the 5 techniques proposed by Wu's taxonomy of questioning techniques, which consisted of repetition, rephrasing, simplification, decomposition, and probing. The data was analyzed by transcribing the video recordings of the lessons. The type of question and questioning techniques used by the teacher were color-coded accordingly. The type of questions were categorized by putting a round bracket on each side of the sentences that were identified as either display question or referential question. After all of the questions have been categorized and color-coded, the result was transferred to the observation checklist. As for the second objective, the type of question and questioning techniques that best promote the learner's participation were determined by highlighting the information pertaining to learners' participation in the teacher's reflective entries and comparing the result with the data from the observation checklist. So the findings for the first research question showed that the teacher had used mostly 4 out of 5 questioning techniques proposed by Wu's taxonomy, which were repetition, rephrasing, decomposition, and probing. The only questioning technique that was not used was simplification. Furthermore, it was identified that the most used type of question and questioning technique by the teacher were display questions and probing. The data gathered for the teacher's reflective entries found that the learner's participation during Lesson 1 was passive, while Lesson 2 recorded that learners were active during online class. Comparing this data with the result from the observation checklist, it was identified that the usage of display questions and probing were the most effective in encouraging the learners of this action research to participate actively during online lessons. Probing is considered as a very engaging questioning technique. It is a useful tool to solicit more information from the students and scaffold their understanding, while display question was proven to be effective in encouraging learners with lower proficiency to respond to teachers' question and partake in classroom discussion, as it only requires learners to give short answers and recall previous knowledge. From the result of the study, it can be concluded that the teacher used various questioning techniques and asked different types of questions during online ESL lessons. The type of question and questioning techniques that were identified to help encourage learners' participation during online learning the most were probing questioning technique and display questions, as they allow more opportunities for learners to respond and learners do not have to think critically when responding. For future research, there are several gaps within this action research where most instruments can be considered when conducting future research, such as interview sessions with students or distributing questionnaires among the students regarding their overall experience and understanding during the lessons, particularly in regard to their reception towards the teacher's questioning. It will also be helpful and beneficial to conduct more action research focusing on teachers' questioning techniques during online lessons, as the number of published studies are limited. That is all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Salman Khan bin Muhammad Amin, with his final year project titled Use of Constructive Feedback and How It Affects Students' Involvement in the Online ESL Classroom among Form 4 students in Tawau.
Assalamualaikum and good day I bid to everybody. My name is Salman Khan bin Muhammad Amin, and the title of my final year project is the use of constructive feedback and how it affects students' participation in the online ESL classroom among Form 4 students in Tawau. Now, the purpose of this study is to identify the relevance of using positive feedback in increasing students' participation in an online classroom. Now, the problem statement that I'd like to point out here are problem of perception, problem of shared meaning, problem of feedback, problem of impact, problem of burdensomeness, and problem of being judged. Okay, now we'll move on to here. Now, the research objective is to identify if the ineffective use of feedback in an online ESL classroom could be a reflection on teachers' competence. And so herein lies our question. Okay, we have 4 different questions that we need to point out. The first of which are, what are the effects of using feedback in an online classroom on Form 4 students? Are the poor implementation of using positive feedback in the classroom solely the fault of the teacher? Are there other factors which may lead to a poor implementation of positive feedback in the classroom? And how are the problems going to be addressed and fixed once they are recognized? Now, before we move on, I would like to say that positive feedback and constructive feedback are essentially the same. I'm just using it intermittently. Just using a different explanation intermittently. Okay, so here are some of the literature review. The participation of students are directly tied to the motivation to learning a particular language. The impact of feedback can be directly attributed to the task complexity, which means the easier the task, the more you want to use positive feedback. The higher the complexity of the task, you don't want to use, or rather you use feedback sparingly. One of the main reasons why students tend not to be motivated to be involved in the classroom is due to teachers' inexperience in the online platform. Now, these two are the main um are the main researches that serve as a blueprint to my research. Okay. Now, the methodology that we use are the research is survey-based, and the research instruments we use are Google Form, interview, and comparison of data from past research. And here are some of our data that we managed to compile together. This section here all but confirms the perceived misgivings of the positive feedback are not always the fault of the teacher. As you can see here, there are other problems like lack of privacy, internet problem, not enough gadgets, and so on. And based on these 2 graphs here, generally speaking, teachers are good at implementing positive feedback, but there should be room for improvements. Now, the general analysis are that students, like I said before, find teachers to be competent enough. There are other factors to inhibit the use of proper positive feedback, and there are room for improvements, such as utilizing a reward system in the online ESL classroom. And the conclusion here is that feedback is a broad academic topic that requires time to fully comprehend. As a result, the research might fall victim to a lack of nuance in the study. And I hope that there will be people who will be taking up the mantle. That is all from me for today. Thank you for listening.
Next presenter, Nurul Izian binti Muhammad Zainuddin with her final year project titled The Implementation of Language Variety Among Apprentice Teachers in ESL Online Classroom.
Assalamualaikum and greetings to everyone. My name is Nurul Izian binti Muhammad Zainuddin and my metric number is D2018-108-2635 and I am from ISMP TESOL and currently I am in semester 7. So today I would like to present my research, which is the implementation of language variety among the apprentice teachers in ESL online classroom. Alright, so the problem statement for this research is, does language variety assist teachers to run teaching and learning lessons smoothly? So this problem statement is actually based on my LM1 teaching practicum experience. And next is the research questions and research objectives. So we have 2 research questions and 2 research objectives. So for the research questions, the first one is, how frequent are apprentice teachers implementing language variety in ESL online classroom? Second is, what are the effects of the implementation of language variety towards students' participation in ESL online classroom? For research objectives, the first one is to identify the frequency of the implementation of language variety among apprentice teachers in ESL online classroom, and secondly, to investigate the effects of the implementation of language variety towards students' participation in ESL online classroom. Alright, so the next is the literature review. So based on the articles that I have read and studied, there are 3 aspects that we need to view, which are language varieties, code switching versus code mixing, and translanguaging. For the methodology, I use quantitative approach to gain the data. The data collection method that I use is questionnaires and surveys, in which the data collection instruments is the closed and open-ended questions on Google Forms. The participants for this research are the apprentice teachers from ISMP TESOL from UPSI and Form 1 and Form 2 students from Sekolah Menengah Kebangsaan Sultan Ibrahim I, Pasir Mas, Kelantan. Alright, next is the findings. So the finding shows that most of the apprentice teachers agree that language variety in online ESL classroom made the teaching and learning lessons become less burden as their students' participation were increasing. They claim that their students become more comfortable and confident to participate in class activity. However, minority of them disagree by the language variety in their lessons, as it can disrupt their students' development in English acquisition. The findings from the students shows that they are agree that teachers should use language variety in ESL online classroom. Since the language background of these students are not from urban area, so they are attached tightly to the local dialect. They think that full English class gave them a headache and trouble to catch up the input by the English teacher. However, there are still minority of them disagree because they want to be better in English language. So they think that using their local dialect can interrupt their attention to focus on English language only. So that is all for the findings. To conclude, language variety can be a helpful tool or inconvenient tool in ESL classroom. Borrowing the first language or the varieties from the first language to assist the teaching and learning lessons is acceptable, but only when the lessons desperately require you to use it. In my opinion, the less implementation of language variety, the better. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Have a good day!
Next presenter, Roselle Leos, with her final year project titled The Use of Code Switching in Online English Second Language ESL Classroom.
Hello and good day everyone. My name is Roselle Leos, metric number D2018-108-108-2601. The title of my final year project is The Use of Code Switching in Online ESL Classroom. First of all, what is code switching? According to Bullock and Toribio 2009, code switching is the act of alternating employment of 2 languages in the same stretch of discourse by a bilingual speaker. In other words, code switching is the process of shifting or changing from one language to another. The research question of this study is, what are the reasons for teachers' use of code switching in class, and how does the teachers' use of code switch in class help to enhance students' participation in online ESL classroom? There are a lot of literature review used to aid me in understanding the study of the topic. However, what I would like to highlight here is that the students enjoy the way the teacher teaches. when the teacher uses the approach of code switching in warming up questions, explaining difficult ideas, keeping discipline and listeners' attention, and when repeating or changing themes. The methods used in this study are qualitative and quantitative methods. The instruments of this research includes teaching video recordings and observation checklists, questionnaire, and reflective entry. These instruments help me to collect the data that I need to answer all of my research questions. Now, moving on to the findings of this research. So generally, from the responses and data received, it can be concluded that most of the pre-service teachers use code switching in class for several reasons, such as to explain, to encourage students to participate in class, to gain students' attention, as well as building close teacher-student relationship. The students' reaction or perception towards the use of code switching in online ESL classroom also shows positive reactions generally. From what being observed by pre-service teachers too, students' positive reactions towards the use of code switching in class, such as able to understand the lesson, vocabulary and tasks, students' confidence to speak or participate in class increases, as well as being motivated to work on the task given, will then eventually help to contribute to increasing the students' participation in online ESL classroom. In conclusion, I think it is undeniable that using or applying code switching in ESL classroom in a proper way can be a positive teaching approaches or strategy to help the language learners to acquire English language. That is all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Nur Hashima binti Azahar, with her final year project titled Pre-Service Teachers' Perceptions Towards SET Induction and its Impact on Students' Interest in Learning.
Greetings to everyone. I'm Nur Hashima binti Azahar and I'm going to present my final year project entitled Pre-Service Teachers' Perceptions Towards SET Induction and its Impact on Students' Interest in Learning. Okay. So, the problem that leads me to my research title is the lack of awareness on the importance of SET inductions. Pre-service teachers often overlook the benefits of having an effective SET inductions. So, I have two research objectives. The first one is to find out pre-service teachers' perceptions with SET induction. The second one is to identify the impacts of SET inductions on students' interest in learning. With the objectives, I came up with two research questions. The first one is, what is pre-service teachers' perceptions on SET inductions? Second, how does SET induction impact students' interest in learning? Okay, next. These are some of the authors of the journals that I refer to that discusses on what is SET inductions, the purpose of it, and the impact it has on students' learning. Okay, moving on to the research methodology. The research method that I use for this study is quantitative. I created a questionnaire that consists 14 questions, wherein 13 Likert scale questions and 1 multiple choice questions. There are two parts in the questionnaires. The first part, items regarding pre-service teachers' perceptions to SET inductions, and part B is items regarding the impact of SET inductions on students' interest in learning. The questionnaire was distributed among 32 TESOL students who are also pre-service teachers who have completed their teaching practicum at least once. Moving on to results and findings. Okay. These are findings for part A. As you can see, majority of respondents strongly agree to most of the items. With that, it is safe to say that pre-service teachers have positive perceptions towards SET inductions. Okay. This is the last item for part A, which is the only multiple choice questions. From this graph, the main purpose for pre-service teachers' planning activities is to ensure students' understanding of learning objective with 84.4%, followed to gain students' attention with 71.9%, to increase students' motivation with 68.8%, and lastly, to relax students' mind with 25%. Okay. This is the table For part B of the question, which determines the impact of set inductions on students' interest in learning. Looking at overall, most respondents either strongly agree or agree that set induction gives impact to students' readiness for learning, motivation, prior knowledge, participation, comprehension, and achievement of learning objectives. Okay. Next, the conclusions. Okay, so in conclusion, upon completing this research, I realized that set induction is very crucial for teachers. The reason why I chose to focus on set induction is because my mentor often emphasized and commented on my set inductions activities. Okay, she said the most important first thing is attracting students' attention and arousing their motivation in the beginning. Okay, when it is attractive enough for students, they will be eager to learn more. Hence, teachers should not underestimate the influence, the effects of set induction. Set induction is also one of teaching skills that every teacher should master. So spending a bit more time to plan effective and interesting activities in set induction will not only attract students' attentions, but also produce better learning outcomes. I completed this research in hope reservist teachers become more attentive to the small part of lesson plan, which is set induction. I think that is all from me. Thank you so much.
Next presenter, Nur Shahira Zubaida binti Marsharuddin with her final year project titled The Use of Translanguaging in ESL Online Classroom.
Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. My name is Nur Shahira Zubaida binti Marsharuddin. I'll be presenting my FYP entitled The Use of Translanguaging in ESL Online Classroom. My research objectives are to identify the reasons why the ESL teachers use translanguaging in the online classroom, to determine students' perception when the teacher uses translanguaging in an online classroom, and then the last one is to examine the advantages and limitations of translanguaging in online classroom. So research question, what are the reasons for the ESL teachers use translanguaging in the online classroom? Next is what are the students' perceptions when the teacher uses translanguaging in an online classroom? And the last one is what are the advantages and limitations of translanguaging in an online classroom? Research participant. The sample used for this research are 65 English teachers in Kuching that consists of 55 female English teachers and 10 male English teachers. This study also involved 30 students of Form 4 and Form 2 from the same area, which are 19 students from Form 4 students and the remaining are Form 2 students. The data collection used by the researcher in this study were questionnaires and survey. For questionnaire 1, it is from the first research objective, which consists of 15 questions that answered by 65 ESL teachers. Next, for questionnaire 2, it is from second research objective. There were 30 respondents of Form 4 and Form 2 that answered this questionnaire. Last but not least, the third research objective, which is the survey, consists of 2 open-ended questions answered by 65 ESL teachers. The questionnaires and survey help the researcher to get feedbacks for the research question. Next is research procedure. So the researcher used Currid-Lewin's model 1946, which this approach consists of 4 phases in one circle of action research. Those 4 phases were the plan, act, observe, and reflect. For the first phase, the researcher carried out an investigation before doing research. Then the researcher has to take an action after problem was identified. Next, the researcher observed whether there were any improvement. Last but not least, the researcher reflects whether the actions taken were successful or not. Here's the findings of the data. The first one is reasons for ESL teachers use translanguaging. Based on table 1, 28 out of 65 respondents agree that the reasons for the ESL teachers use translanguaging was the teachers want to clarify meaning with the students. Other reasons why the teacher employed translanguaging in the ESL online classroom was to translate or explain new vocabulary to the students, in which there were 27 respondents agreed to this reason. However, there were 57 out of 65 respondents disagree that greeting the students in Malay language or L1 become the reasons for the teacher to employ translanguaging. Moreover, 42 respondents disagree that giving instruction in Malay language or L1 become the reasons for the ESL teacher use translanguaging. The data obtained enable the researcher to answer the research question number 1. Next, student perception. Table 2 shows that student perceptions when the teacher employed translanguaging in ESL online classroom. Students understand the topic better when the teacher used English and Malay during online class, where 25 out of 30 students agreed about it. Furthermore, there were two perceptions that share same percentage, which were students understand better when the teacher used Malay language to explain meaning of words and to explain expression, which indicates 70%. Other than that, there were 12 respondents choose to disagree, for I feel confident to ask teacher in English during online class. To conclude, the data gathered by researcher helped to answer the research question number 2. Advantages of translanguaging. Based on table 3, 33 out of 65 respondents said that the advantages of translanguaging in online classroom was low proficiency students understand better. Other than that, based on pie chart 1, there was only 1% that the respondents said for advantages of translanguaging in online classroom, which was learn translating skill. Last but not least, limitations of translanguaging. Based on table 4, there were two limitations of translanguaging in online classroom that shares the same number of respondents, which were students refused to speak English and take English for granted, and students expecting teacher to interpret and not mastering the language on their own, which indicates 12 respondents. Other than that, based on pie chart 2, the lowest percentage for limitations of translanguaging in online classroom was students have low self-esteem to converse in English, which indicates only 3%. Hence, the data obtained by researcher help to answer the third research question. That's all for me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Nur Shahira Liana binti Ahmad with her final year project titled The Use of the First Language or Code Switch in the ESL Classroom.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Shahira Liana binti Ahmad. My metric number is D 2018-108, 26 and 39. And my supervisor is Dr. Siti Shuhaida binti Syukur, and my research title is The Use of the First Language or Code Switching in the ESL Classroom. So in my study, there are two research objectives, which are: first is to determine the student perceptions on the use of code switching in the ESL classroom, and the second one is to examine the effects of on the students' cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains in the ESL classroom. My research questions are: first is, what are the student perceptions on the use of code switching in the ESL classroom, and the second one is, what are the effects on the student cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains in the ESL classroom. Next will be the literature review. So language is a system of communication, and one of the spoken languages in the world is English. According to Lin, code switching in the classroom refers to the use of multiple linguistic codes in the classroom by any of the participants. For example, the instructor, students and also teacher, assistant. And according to Grosjean 1982, he defined code switch as the shifting that occurs between two or more languages concurrently or interchangeably within one discussion. For the students' perceptions, the student mostly think that the first language should be used in the ESL classroom, even though they know the importance of English, but they somehow think that the teacher should use the first language because most of the students are low and intermediate proficiency students, so they think that they still need the teachers to use the first language. A cognitive domain is a learning process which encloses a hierarchy of skills such as processing information, developing understanding, applying knowledge, solving problems, and also conducting research. While affective domain involves our feeling, emotions, and also attitudes. And the psychomotor domain is comprised of utilizing motor skills and coordinating them. Next will be the methodology. So the research design of this study is quantitative method approach, and the research setting is the study was conducted online and in a school in Kuala Terengganu. So the respondent was 20 students of Form 2 and Form 4 in a secondary school in Kuala Terengganu, and the data collection instrument was classroom observation and also the questionnaire. For the result, the researcher found out that 65% are intermediate students, and 30% are low proficiency student, and 5% is high proficiency student. One of the question asked in the questionnaire, do you think it is a good idea for you to use your first language in the English classroom? 65 of them answered yes, and another 35% answered no. Another question, how often do you use the first language in the classroom? In the English classroom, 50% answered rarely, and 25% said very often and often. So how frequently do your English teacher use the first language in the classroom? So 65% answered often. Facts of the code switching on student cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains in the classroom. I know that I need to improve my English in the classroom. 40% of them agreed. That is all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Dike Nabila binti Eke Soprisha with a final year project titled Teaching During COVID-19, Issues and Teaching Approaches for Open and Distance Learning ODL.
Malala Yousafzai once said, "One student, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world." Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and greetings to everyone. My name is Dayanku Nabila binti Awangku Soprisha, and I will be presenting my research on teaching during COVID-19, issues and teaching approaches for open and distance learning ODL. The current research relates back to the observation I have made during my teaching practicum. Throughout the period of 2 months, I observed how both me and my teachers were struggling to adapt to the current implementation of open and distance learning ODL. Certain learning processes were disrupted as existing teachers weren't adequately prepared to teach for ODL classes. They were only trained to teach students in a traditional face-to-face classroom. Therefore, this study is conducted to fulfill the following objectives. Firstly, to identify issues associated with ODL amongst teachers during COVID-19, and secondly, to determine suitable teaching approaches to aid teachers in ODL during COVID-19. This simultaneously answers my research questions of the same theme. The findings of this study will contribute greatly towards the improvement of Malaysia's education system as it presents a solution in times of the COVID-19 global crisis. Furthermore, the current pandemic is undeniably a productive area of research because so much about it is still yet unknown. This study seeks to explore the unknown and discover possible breakthroughs that may impact the future of education. Despite how ODL has slowly replaced and shifted the educational paradigm in the recent century, it has been shown that there are still issues emerging just as recently. Musingapi et al. 2015 identified 3 distinctive issues facing students undergoing ODL: situational, institutional, and dispositional. Situational challenges include job and home responsibility that reduces time for study. Institutional-related challenges include poor logistic system or lack of appropriate advising, and dispositional challenges are related to learners' own attitudes and feeling. Awang Ahmad 2018 added that ICT facilities and resources have always been an issue for the Malaysia's Ministry of Education, since there is still a huge gap between urban and rural schools in terms of internet connection and network resources. Moving forward, for this study, the action research design was chosen. The model used in this research is based on Kurt Lewin's 1946 cyclic model, consists of planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. For the sampling, 33 in-service teachers from secondary schools around Tuaran Sabah were chosen to participate in a mixed method of survey design. The data collection was as follows. 3 in-service teachers were interviewed through a video conference, while 30 in-service teachers' responses were collected via a web-based questionnaire. For the data analysis, I use both thematic analysis and descriptive statistical analysis. Thematic analysis is a method that involves interpreting through a set of texts and identifying patterns in its meaning. Meanwhile, descriptive statistical analysis is a brief descriptive value that summarizes a given data set, which can represent the entire population or sample of population. The semi-structured interview revealed that teachers are struggling with issues such as students' low attendance rate, lack of classroom participation, and teachers' inability to assess their academic progress. This was supported by the web-based questionnaire respondents who majorly agreed towards the issues mentioned. However, even a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic must stop teachers from leading the efforts to ensure learning never stops. Teachers came together to share their experience and by recommending novel teaching approaches to be utilized in an ODL classroom. The questionnaire results indicated a preference towards synchronous learning approach, student-centered approach, technology-based approach, and collaborative learning approach amongst the respondents. All of these teaching approaches will not only help teachers in planning the lesson effectively from start to finish, students are also given an enriching learning experience. To conclude, the findings were sufficient in answering both the research objective and research question. Several research limitations, predominantly an inadequate sample size for statistical measurement and time constraints in data collection, are present throughout the study. Future studies might want to look into the perspective of teachers teaching in schools located in urban and suburban areas, and a case study to measure the effectiveness of utilizing the aforementioned teaching approaches. That is all from me. Thank you.
Our final presenter, Nurul Shafira Amani binti Muhammad Shafiq, with her final year project titled COVID-19 and E-Learning, Challenges and Opportunities from the Perspectives of Pre-Service Teachers in UPSI.
Assalamualaikum and good day to everyone. I am Nurul Shafira Amani binti Muhammad Shafiq, and today I will present my research entitled COVID-19 and E-Learning, Challenges and Opportunities from the Perspective of Pre-Service Teachers in UPSI. The change of the education system from conventional learning system to e-learning during the pandemic had put on a toll on the teachers to have skills in utilizing technology and the internet to conduct a lesson. E-learning mainly relies on the use of internet and technology. So this research directly addresses the issues like poor internet connections, lack of technological skills, to name a few, as key factors in the challenges of the e-learning implementation. Next, there are 2 research objectives and research questions, which are: first, to identify the challenges faced by the pre-service teachers to implement e-learning in the ESL classroom during COVID-19, and second is to probe into how pre-service teachers in UPSI implement e-learning to complete their practicum during the pandemic. Moving on to the next chapter, literature review. Past research from researchers like Vera Wardina stated the definition of online learning or e-learning, while Bailey and Lee stated the benefits of e-learning, and a study conducted by Almaya had categorized several challenges related to adopting e-learning. Despite the challenges, there are also opportunities for the pre-service teachers where the information technology that they had used and gained can be used to develop an innovative lesson that will be very useful in the education system. As for the methodology, this research uses a qualitative research method using a set of online questionnaires. The researcher had decided to use the purposive sampling method in selecting the participants and had distributed the questionnaire to 15 participants from the ESL pre-service teachers from UPSI. Lastly, the researcher had used the 4 steps data analysis model to analyze the collected data. Based on the results and findings, both of the research questions is answered. For research question 1, the findings resulted in several main challenges that the participants had experienced during the e-learning implementation, which are the lack of teaching support facilities provided by the school, and some students lack technology devices to access e-learning. Another challenge is the limitations of both teacher and students' internet connection. Third main challenge relates to the teacher's readiness to adapt to e-learning. Students' participation and motivation are also challenging aspects to the participants, as most of their students are passive and do not participate in the lesson. As for research question 2, most of the participants implement e-learning synchronously using online meeting websites, especially those in the urban school area. They deliver their teaching materials using social media applications and Google websites, while some of them also use online application or websites. In terms of teaching approach or method, most of the participants applied collaborative learning, where the teachers and students cooperate to accomplish a certain task with the help of communication tools. To create an effective lesson, most participants provided audio-visual materials using online software and websites like YouTube. They also provide online quizzes using online websites and provide worksheets and modules using websites like Canva to make it more interesting. Lastly, this research had helped me to understand the concept of e-learning both theoretically and practically. The research provided me with key ideas that helped me examine and reflect on my personal pedagogical beliefs and guidelines to improve my future teaching practice. As an implication, this research describes the alterations needed to utilize an effective instructional pedagogy and supports the pre-service teacher's readiness to implement e-learning. One of the recommendations for future research is to highlight more of the issues, challenges, opportunities, and benefits of implementing e-learning in an English language classroom, as it could help to improve the e-learning implementation in the education sector. That is all from me. Thank you for your time and attention.
We hope you have gained knowledge from our presenters. Please do join us for the closing ceremony that will begin in a few minutes. Thank you and see you there.